or you can dial in with the phone. Also, please go ahead and enter any questions you may have in the Q&A pane, and we will get to them at the end of the session. We also encourage you to join the conversation socially using #Glassdoor. And now I would like to introduce our featured speaker. Steve Burton is the VP of B2B Marketing at Glassdoor and will walk you through the agenda. On over to Steve.
Thanks, Cher. So here's the agenda we've got lined up for today. Firstly, I just want to kind of start and look at the basics about being in a startup and what it's like from a recruiting perspective, and then take you on the journey of where you start, how you build an employer brand, how you go about influencing candidates, and then something which is kind of being kind of more relevant recently is the importance of mobile in both of those areas. And then finally, we'll touch on the best practices to start for how you can start recruiting today. A little bit about myself. I recently came from a startup. In fact, the last 8 years of my career have been in startups. The last one was in the Bay Area with a company called AppDynamics, and I saw the company go from about 25 people to over 450. So I've got quite a bit of experience in recruiting, and I'm going to try and kind of touch on those experiences as I go through the presentation. So a good place to start is really what really happens in a startup. It may not be a huge surprise, but rapid growth is typically what happens. Whether that's you get a round of funding, and suddenly you need to go and hire 5 or 10 engineers, or you need to kind of periodically sustain the growth in order to keep the company moving in the right direction. So if I look back at my experiences at AppDynamics, we were pretty much doubling the size of the company every year for the last 3 years, and that's pretty daunting. Fortunately, I was good friends with the people in recruiting, but it was amazing to see a company go from 25 people to 50 to 100 to 200 to 400 people, and that's something to be aware of. It's kind of a long journey. Hopefully, when you're in a startup and you need to start hiring, it's something that never really stops. The biggest kind of key takeaway is when you're a startup, no one really knows you exist other than the employees who are in the startup, and if you've got 1 or 2 customers who've kind of joined you at the early stage of your journey. The reality is candidates aren't looking for you. There's not a lot of places that can find, hey, new startups, new cool ideas. A lot of the evangelism and a lot of the awareness is down to you to generate that interest and to generate that awareness. Another key takeaway in a startup is not everyone's experienced in hiring. So I know when I joined AppDynamics at 25 people, we didn't have a recruiting team. The recruiting team was me. It was every person in the company was a recruiter. They had a credit card. They would go to multiple places to post jobs. They would conduct the interviews. They would schedule them. Everything was really done and down to the individual and the different teams. And that's something to be aware of. Even I thought it was a huge learning curve. Pretty much, I'd say a third of my time was spent recruiting. And having that expectation that everyone is a recruiter in a startup, that's something you need to share with people in your startup company as you make that progression. It's super, super competitive, especially in the likes of the Bay Area or in prime locations where there's a lot of competitors, a lot of companies who are hiring the same type of people as you. It's really about standing out so you can attract the right talent to your company. And here's the example of what AppDynamics achieved. We were pretty successful in how we got from a 25 people company to over 400 people, and the way we built a brand and the results we managed to achieve. And you can see the costs associated with doing the recruiting was very kind of manageable, and we made great progress. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through some of the basic things we did and that you can go about. Glassdoor was one of the channels we used at AppDynamics to help us recruit. There was other channels as well. The biggest lesson I learned is always be selective. Don't compromise on quality of candidates. I was always told, hire people that are better than you. And that was probably the best bit of advice I was given. The people on your team are really what the culture in your company is going to be about. I never really hired people who I knew wouldn't fit into the team environment. And that was something I wouldn't compromise on. It's actually ironic. The first person I hired was the first person I fired. And I made that mistake of bringing people in who looked good on paper, who had the right qualifications, the right background, but as a cultural fit and getting on with other team members in the team, that wasn't successful. So I always kind of think about what is the culture that I want in my startup? Who are the people that you have to work with every day? Because the reality is a startup is a hard place to work. You've got to roll your hands up and your sleeves and really get down to the nitty-gritty pretty much every day for 3 or 4 years. So here's some kind of top 4 qualities for hiring startup talent. Number 1 is adaptability. Really, there is no job title in a startup. Even if your job title is VP of Marketing or VP of Sales or Principal Engineer, pretty much you're in it together. You've got to turn something from something being really small, an idea, into something which can be potentially really big. And that involves having multiple hats and not really kind of assuming responsibilities and pushing stuff away. Everyone who you bring into a startup needs to roll their sleeves up and be adaptable to the different things that are being asked of them. Whether that's writing software, whether it's attending trade shows, whether it's being on emails or support cases, or really doing whatever's required to make the company successful. Second is honesty. And again, it might sound obvious, but really the integrity, you've got to work with people every single day, and what you're doing is very, very difficult. It's difficult to be successful if you all can't work together and really work as a team. And teamwork is what turns startups into successful small companies. And again, more teamwork and integrity and honesty is what's going to get you down the path to a bigger size company as well. I'd say the biggest thing that's important is confidence. You've got to believe that what you have in the startup company, whether it's a product or a service, is going to be big and it's going to be better than anything that exists in the marketplace. And having confident people who can look at a problem, who can figure that problem out, regardless of whether that's in sales, marketing, engineering, support, QA, all of the different areas of the company, you need confident people. Because there's going to be good days you come into work, there's going to be bad days, and if you don't have confidence, you're not going to be able to motivate people around you, as well as yourself, to do great things. And that's the challenge of a startup, is doing things that no other company or another team can think of, so you can disrupt the market and you can be successful. So hiring people with confidence is super important. Along with confidence is enthusiasm. It's about having that winning mentality. It's about knowing that you're on a successful road and the right road, and picking up people along the way who can be as enthusiastic about the product or service or the company as you. If you're excited about the company you work for, chances are the customers or the people you interact with in the business, they're going to get enthusiastic as well. There's nothing worse than having a great product or a great service and not being enthusiastic about what you can do for customers or the problems you can solve. So being upbeat, being very motivated and enthusiastic is really, they're the key kind of qualities you need for talent in a startup. The biggest problem a startup will have is you won't be known initially. Whether you're 5 people, 10 people, 25 people, unless you've got a killer, radical kind of disruptive product, for example, like Instagram, which was 10 people, no one's really going to know who you are. You might have great technology. You might be solving real problems for customers. You might be making a lot of money. but are you known to the job candidates who are out there who you want to recruit? So like this is, for me, like where you need to start. You've got to come up with ideas to get your name out there and to build awareness. And it all starts with telling a story about what the company exists for, the products or services you sell, and why it's so compelling and why it's different in the marketplace. If your story isn't compelling or interesting, no one's really going to want to listen to that story. And your story has got to be unique. It's got to be about the company. It can't be about the market or the problem. It has to be about the company and why the company is such a great place to work for. So employer branding is really where you begin. Without a brand, no one really knows who you are. And at AppDynamics, our brand, we were quite edgy. We were quite we had great technology, but it was a quirky, edgy culture we had in the company. And that was really our brand. We wanted our brand to be fun. The market had 5 or 6 big traditional vendors, the likes of IBM, CA, HP, BMC, Oracle, Microsoft, a lot of the old school vendors. And our brand was really about taking those corporate ways of doing business and really being more modern and more easy to do business with customers. And what we did was we looked at ways we could be disruptive, where we could get attention, whether it was in the press, whether it was on social media, and we really wanted to be different to what customers were used to. And we genuinely believed that what we had in the technology and the products we offered customers was better than anything they could get on the marketplace. And we really went about making that happen through an employer brand. And a big part of that is really defining your value proposition. So in terms of people, why do people want to join a company? What can the company offer the candidates that's different to what those candidates already get today? So this is where I think a lot of employers struggle. They typically look at what other companies are doing. So whether the employee value proposition is it's free food at lunchtimes, or it's a beer keg in the middle of the company. It could be vacation. It could be stock options. There's lots of things that you can define your value proposition around. But really, what is the people you're trying to attract? What is the culture that you want to have in the company? Because I think that says a lot about what your value proposition should be. If you want to hire people who are fun to work with, who are enthusiastic, who'll work every hour God sends until they solve a problem, then you need to have a value proposition that matches the character and really the attributes of those people. Don't feel like you have to copy value propositions from other companies if those other companies don't represent the culture that you want in your own startup. So you can see here 3 simple things. First of all, why should a job seeker choose our company? And really, what's compelling? So what? Ask yourself that. If you looked at a career page on a website and it wasn't compelling or interesting, so what? Why should I join that company? Once you've got that, then how are you different to the competitors in the marketplace as well? Chances are there's not just going to be established companies that are in the marketplace. There's going to be other new startups that are identical to you who are searching for talent as well. So you've got to be able to tell a unique story about why you're different. If you're not different, there's no real compelling reason why a job seeker is going to want to work at your company. So in terms of employer brands, 3 key ingredients. One is the culture, obviously, the culture that you want in your company, the way you want to do business, the way you go to market, and the way you motivate people internally. Second is the opinion of the employees, and really that's key. The culture has to reflect what employees feel on a day-to-day basis, because as new candidates come into the company, they're going to see that culture, and the brand has to be an accurate reflection of what you see inside the company. If you project this awesome brand and people turn up for work and they don't see it as true or they see it as inaccurate, those people are probably going to want to leave the company. And that's something you can't afford to do in a startup because it's so difficult to hire. Attrition is something you've got to avoid at all costs. So it's super important that your brand actually reflects the inside culture and the opinion of employees and candidates as well. As I mentioned previously, the competition is important. It's something that we did a fantastic job of at AppDynamics, is really understanding who our competition was and why we could position the company as different. If you're not different, you're going to struggle to compete. And competing is how you be successful in a market. It's how you take market share and revenue from other companies, and it's no different in recruiting. So understand the competition, understand how they try and recruit talent, and see if you can trump those competitors so that you come across as the best choice and the best option for job candidates. The reality is the candidates care about the employer brand. They're influenced a lot these days online because information is available everywhere. If I'm a job candidate and I don't know anything about the company, there's multiple places that I can go and I can get real good information. Number one is I can ask people who work at the company. I can ask my friends or colleagues if they've heard of the company and what their perception is of the marketplace. I can go online, I can look at the Glassdoor reviews. I can go to the company's career page. I can go to the company's website, and I can try and see and understand what the company is about. The famous question of what's it like to work at Google. I don't work at Google, and I have lots of people who don't work at Google, but there's a perception that it's cool, it's different, it's full of smart people. Even though people haven't worked at Google, they still have a perception of what it is to work at Google. And that's really Google's employer brand. If you can have a brand that projects and is aware in the marketplace, where people who don't necessarily work for you, but they know of your company and what it's like to work there, that's a real good place to be. If we look specifically at a lot of the kind of millennials, or young people, and what their kind of top decisions are for joining a company, you can see that people and culture fit is number one. So if you're attracting young people into a startup environment, either as engineers or it could be in kind of basic support or marketing, this is the key things that they care about. People and culture fit, but more importantly, career potential. I think this is a great opportunity for startups when they're trying to recruit talent, is if you join a company that's got 20 to 30 people and that startup is successful, chances are that company is going to be 300 to 500 people 3 or 4 years down the line. And that's a great piece of information, because as the company grows, so can the individuals who contribute to that company. There's going to be lots of open positions that become available. There's going to be great places to move between teams to learn new things. And that's something a startup can offer individuals and candidates, even on the first day they join the company. As I said, job titles are a little bit irrelevant in a startup environment because everyone's got to contribute, everyone's got to chip in and make a difference. So there's going to be a wide kind of spread of roles and duties to do in a startup environment. And again, work-life balance. This is a little bit mixed. I mean, startups are hard work, but you tend to have a lot more fun because you're in it together. There's a lot more camaraderie, teamwork, and collaboration between groups. So I know when I was at AppDynamics, I had a lot of fun. We worked our asses off, but it was a fun place to work. There was people who we spent a lot of time working in conference rooms, but we also spent a lot of time in bars and clubs, kind of relaxing and celebrating our success. So that's just something to be aware of as well. Some interesting facts there. Here's one company that does a great job of recruiting millennials, small company called Box. You can see, again, some of the results they had. Again, using Glassdoor, that was one of their options for employer branding and recruiting millennials. They also use lots of other channels as well and solutions. But there's a lot of unique ways to really get your brand out there. I mean, you can look at this case study, you can see those photos of working at Box, and you get a pretty good idea of what the culture's like at Box, just with 4 simple images you can see there. And that's something, again, make your startup stand out, make it compelling, make it interesting to the people who you want to recruit. So that you can see the images there are more targeted at younger people. So if it's young people you want to recruit, project that image and project that brand. So I'm going to walk through now some simple things you can do to have an attractive brand. Number 1 is transparency. As I said, the brand has to reflect the culture and what you see in the company. If you've got a kick-ass startup where you enjoy it and it's fun and you love coming to work, you've got to show that in your brand, regardless of whether it's raw, whether it's edgy, whether it's not quite kind of perfect or rounded. You've got to have people believing that the brand they see is what they get when they start at work. Second thing is employee engagement. Leverage the employees that exist in the startup. Make them evangelists of recruiting and selling the company. Get them excited about candidates. Help them understand what recruiting is about and the fact that a startup can't be successful unless they recruit great people to help them on their journey to great things. As you saw with Box, visual branding, that's a huge element there. And then finally, data analysis and having a presence on mobile devices. So I'm going to walk through each of these right now and just give you an idea of why it's important. So first of all, transparency. There's nothing worse than a candidate applying for a job and being sold on the company and the startup where everything's perfect, everything's great, and we are like being told, yeah, we have a fantastic culture, we have a great social environment, people love coming into work, and then on day 1 they turn up and they don't see any of that. That's probably going to cause that person to leave the company or look for an alternative job. And that's something, again, you can't afford to lose people in a startup. The cost and the time associated with hiring people is significant. Some of the positions when I was recruiting took up to 6 months to find the right people because compromising on the quality or the type of individual that I wanted was just something I'm not prepared to do. But when you get to the final stages of hiring those individuals, the last thing you want to do is paint an inaccurate picture of what it's like to work in the environment. So being transparent is super important. Here's a statistic that was done recently in a survey we did at Glassdoor. 88% of new employees are looking to seek new opportunities within the first 6 months of starting a new job. That's based on the information that when a person starts or goes into a new position, they're not fully aware of what it is like to work at that company. They don't have an accurate picture of the hiring process that was presented to them. And I know this is something recruiters do a kind of great job of is selling the candidate hard on the company and the benefits over other companies and other competitors. If you're selling a person hard about why they're making such a great decision about joining your company, and all of the reasons you're selling that candidate turn out to be false or not true, that person's going to feel misled, and they're going to feel like, hey, this isn't what I signed up for. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of new employees will actually look for new jobs, especially in a startup, where if the startup's not immediately successful, there might be another startup which is only, I don't know, 5 minutes away down the road, or they could leave pretty immediately and go to another startup, especially if they get a phone call or they've got friends in other companies that are moving around. So you got to be super transparent, because the impact of not being transparent is people will leave. Perhaps even more so when you're recruiting engineers. So my career started, I was a software engineer for a US tech consultancy. And actually, I was painted the wrong picture when I went through the recruiting process. I came out of university. I'd just done Java development, and I was super excited about building applications and development and new technology. And the company that I worked for, like, sold me hard on that. They're like, yeah, you're going to work on a team of 4 or 5 people. You're going to build really cool technology. And then you're going to work with fantastic clients. You're going to love it. You're going to progress. We're going to move you on to new technologies. We're going to train you up. And they sold me the best possible story I could hear for being a software developer. And what happened was I went through the boot camp, and my first project was on application support. So I wasn't building applications. I was fixing and supporting them. And my role, I had a mobile phone, and whenever the customer's application broke, they called me and said, my application's broken, can you fix it? So for the first year in my company, I wasn't doing any development. I was basically just listening to people's problems and fixing those problems. And at that time, I was actually looking around. I wanted to do development. I was seeing what opportunities existed. And it was only when I went back to the employer and I said, look, this isn't what I signed up for. I wanted to do development. I didn't want to do support. They actually moved me to a development project because I threatened to quit. And that's super important. A lot of businesses today are defined by software and applications. And in a lot of companies, applications are the differentiator. So whether you Box or your Salesforce.com, the software and engineers you need to make those companies successful. And engineers like myself are super skeptical people. If they feel like they're being BS to, or things aren't as accurate as they were sold, then they're not going to be happy. And they're going to probably tell their contacts and their networks that the company they work for isn't a great place to be. So just be aware of that. Here's several ways you can be transparent. I'd say the biggest one there is give the employees a voice. The only way your brand can be transparent is if your employees actually validate and can back up the brand that you stand for. If employees are excited and it's a fun place to work, then chances are they're going to validate the brand. They're going to be able to contribute, and they're going to influence the brand as well, because employees will tell their friends will tell their friends, and the story goes on. But you've got to make sure your employees are heard. In a startup environment, that's your best possible asset to building a brand and being transparent with job candidates. Because if the candidates can sense that the employees are happy, they're going to know it's a great place to work. Social media, I'd say, again, this is something we use a lot of at AppDynamics, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. Anywhere you can get your message out there about who you are, the success you're having, and the problems you solve is huge. I'd say any publicity is good publicity when you're a startup, whether it's kind of good, negative, or in between reviews. It's awareness that you didn't currently have. Third-party endorsements, always good. Customer success stories, like that's another thing that we played a lot of. If you can get customers to validate the problems you solve as a company or a service, and get them to tell job candidates like why the company they want to work at is so important, that's huge. And also mobile as well, as we'll get to later on. So employee engagement, an easy way to do this is really simple, and I'm obviously going to be biased because I work at Glassdoor, but you can actually amplify your brand on Glassdoor by asking your employees to contribute reviews and to paint the picture of what it's really like to work with at a startup. And employee engagement, it doesn't have to be perfect. All you want people to be is honest about what it is like to work at your company and what the company stands for and why those employees love coming into work every day. And again, if your employees are not happy, and that's something you've got to fix. Because if your employees are not happy, if people are interviewing with those same employees, then that's going to influence the job candidates who go through your pipeline and your recruiting process. you've got to have happy employees, and your story has got to revolve around the culture and how successful your employees are being in the company. Here's another interesting statistic from a survey we did. I think we interviewed over 2,500 job seekers. Over 95% of them say employees' reviews influence their decisions on where to work. And that's simple. If you don't know anything about a company, the first place you're going to go is probably the company's website. The second place you're going to go is going to be a community like Glassdoor, where you can see inside and try and understand what the company is like to work for, what people are saying about the company. Is it good? Is it bad? Are they in the press much? Kind of independent reviews is really kind of what it's like for the job seeker. And this is no different from me and my wife going out for a meal every evening where we log on to Yelp or Zagat and we look for reviews for restaurants in our area. We're only going to pick the restaurants that have good reviews. We don't want to go to a restaurant that has bad reviews or kind of not nice things of what people have said about the food in other restaurants. And it's not just eating out at restaurants, buying cars or going on holidays or choosing hotels. Everything we do these days, we can get information on pretty quickly through a mobile app or through surfing online. And that helps us make decisions. So probably one of the biggest decisions you're going to make in your life is which companies you go to work for. So if you're going to rely on reviews for restaurants and hotels, job candidates are going to rely on reviews to figure out which employer to work for. This is ways you can kind of solicit your employees to see what they're saying about your company. You can incorporate a lot of these processes into your boot camp or how you onboard employees. So, for example, internally, you can do surveys, either with existing employees or new hire surveys, so for people who come on board. You can hold meetings once a quarter. Obviously, the exit interviews is something you want to avoid at all costs in startups because the cost of attrition is so high. But having a pulse on what your employees are thinking and what the employees want is super important. And again, externally, you can rely on communities like Glassdoor, where the candidates themselves can post reviews of what the interviews were like. The employees can rate the company, and you can look at the salary postings as well to see how much the startups pay. So work with your employees. Don't be afraid to ask them questions or ask them to have an opinion or to ask them to have a review on what it's like to work at the company. If the people are happy, you've got nothing to worry about in a startup. And when you're obviously recruiting people, you've got to make sure that you're recruiting the people who you want to fit your culture and who are best for your company environment. Motivate your employees is another huge thing. You've got to define a lot of things like simple things. What is success? What is winning? And whether those things are actually measurable for your employees as well. So that I'm not just talking about personal performance, but what about the team's performance and the company's performance? If the company's been successful, that success has got to be heard. It's got to be heard through employees. It's got to be heard when you speak to customers or you speak to job candidates. It's got to be something that you amplify throughout the marketplace, so you can create buzz and awareness that your company exists and it's a company people should really want to work for. Again, if I look back at Dynamics, any sniff of success we had, we channeled it everywhere we could, through social media, through conversations with customers, with job candidates, with prospects. We just really wanted to give people the sense that we were achieving great things as a company and that people who joined us could be part of that success. Sounds obvious, but making a brand visual is a big thing. A brand can't be just text and written forms of content. For example, here's VMware's visuals they use to show what their brand's like. And you can see just with 8 simple photos, you can understand what it's like to work as an architect at VMware. And you can see the people, they all seem happy. It's authentic, it's not manufactured. It feels real, and you get a sense of what it's actually like to work at VMware as an architect. And again, the visuals, make them authentic to your company. Don't spend a lot of money or a lot of time trying to make it kind of like the next piece of art that would win awards. It's not about that. It's about being real and being kind of authentic to the candidates who are researching your company. And again, if this picture wasn't real or these pictures weren't real, if I'm an architect and I walk into VMware and it's nothing like that, what does it say about the company? It doesn't give the best impression that the company is credible and they're accurate and they're true to their word. So make the visuals stand out and make them relevant to who you're trying to recruit within the startup environment. As I said, once you've got it, once you find the success, tell everyone you can. Hit all of the social media channels. I'd even go to say you can now get social media tools where you can tell the story once and it will fire that story and synchronize that across all of your social media channels, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, YouTube, all of the videos, Glassdoor. It's about getting it out there as often as possible. And that's something we did daily at Dynamics. It had a huge impact. Everyone's LinkedIn status updates were always singing about what was going on in Dynamics, the success we had. And we were building a network of news about the company, and we were building awareness every single day of the year. And we started at nothing, and now the awareness is pretty significant. So social media is huge. A big part, though, is understanding and measuring your brand over time. Just because you have a great story to tell and you're using social media and you feel like you're making awareness, you've got to look at the results of all of that effort. So unless you can analyze and measure what your company's awareness is and brand, you don't know whether things are improving or whether things are staying the same or whether things are declining. So analytics is really where this comes in. And a lot of social media communities these days have analytics built in, and they'll basically tell you where you were a year ago versus today and allow you to compare with the competition. So for example, at Glassdoor, we can monitor the traffic on each company's pages. We can allow our customers to compare that traffic and that awareness with competitors in the marketplace. We've got reputation scorecards, as you can see there in the screenshot, where you can compare the number of reviews, the CEO rating, the culture, the benefits, the career opportunities. You can compare what it's like, how your brand compares to the competition that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. If you can't measure your employee brand or you can't measure your awareness, then you don't know what things are working, you don't know how to improve it, and you don't know whether you're being successful. And building a brand isn't just something you do once and you forget about. Building a brand is continuous because your brand is always changing. You might have different success, you might have new success, you might, as the company gets bigger, you eventually have to put in more process, you have to kind of sell to a different audience. So the brand is always evolving in a lot of startups right from day one to present time. And again, that was something I saw at AppDynamics. Our brand initially was very edgy, very cheeky, whereas the brand today, it still retains those elements, but it's a little bit more professional. It's the companies that they do business with is obviously significantly more formal. So like understanding how the brand changes over time and the awareness is important, and analytics and reporting is how you do that. Lastly, this is really super important. If you think about people who want to join a startup, specifically engineering, a big part of what they do on a day-to-day basis is through a mobile device. how they communicate through friends, how they actually get information, and how they spend a lot of their time is on a mobile device. It's not on a laptop. It's not on a desktop. So if your kind of experience or the way you project your brand towards job candidates isn't mobile friendly, then you're going to have a problem. And here's proof of that. You can see mobile usage will overtake desktop usage in 2014. And that's huge. I mean, that really kind of hits home how important it is to make sure your brand and your recruiting influence is compatible on a mobile device. You would be shocked how many customers and how many websites today are not mobile friendly. And also as well, you'd be shocked at how many career pages and the experience of applying for a job is incompatible with a mobile device. So for example, if I'm searching on a mobile, if I'm searching on my iPhone and I go to a company's website and I click apply for a job and I have to pinch and scroll and I have to fill in 120 fields on a form and upload my resume, how do I do that on a mobile device? Am I going to, chances are I'm going to give up. And this is, if there's one tip you get from this is really go about making your recruiting strategy, making your brand, and making the way you influence candidates mobile ready. You've got to ensure that experience is as good as it is on your web experience, on the desktop experience, because right now at least half of your traffic is coming through a mobile device. And if half of your traffic and candidates are researching your company and your jobs through a mobile device, but your experience is bad, they're probably going to not proceed any further because they can't get access to the information they need. They can't apply for jobs without it being a painful process. And if something's painful, candidates are not going to want to do that. So you can see here, like your job descriptions, make them concise, make them to the point, and make it so you don't have to read 4 or 5 paragraphs of text, because on a mobile device, you don't really want to be doing that. Again, in terms of media downloads, like some images is good, but don't overdo it. Don't feel like you have to add a lot of compelling videos, and also avoid using Adobe Flash, because a lot of devices and mobile applications don't support that platform anymore. And again, if I'm an engineer and I want to work for a company, I don't really want to work for a company that's not web savvy or not mobile savvy, or who doesn't understand the fact that mobile is important to that. If your corporate website or your career page isn't mobile ready, chances are the engineers are not going to be impressed when they come across your brand through their mobile device. These are the key benefits of having a strong brand for a startup. Number one is attract the right talent. Sounds obvious, but if you have a brand that represents what your company stands for, you will attract people who want to be part of that brand, who want to be part of that culture, who want to work at a company that and have the opportunities that you provide. A brand is really your story and why your story is different against the competition. So if you have a strong employer brand, if a job candidate's got 2 or 3 offers and one of those offers is with the competition and your brand is better than the competition, chances are that candidate is going to pick your company over the other companies that have a less vocal and kind of stronger brand. And that's really important. Your brand has to be different. It has to be unique. It has to tell your story. It's got to almost tell the story of excitement about why you're the company that candidate should be working at and not considering any other opportunities. It also helps a lot with recruitment costs. If I look back at how many people I interviewed in my previous job, how very little of them had done research or were aware of the brand, you can save a lot of time and effort by minimizing the time on the phones, on the interviews, on on educating the candidates before you have conversations with them. If you've got a super strong employer brand online, they're going to know everything about your company, what you stand for, the products you solve, how you help customers. They're going to know all that before they engage with you during the interview process. And they're going to be educated, and they're going to go into the whole recruitment process with their eyes open instead of not knowing much about the company. And that saves a lot of time and effort. Also as well, employee retention. If employees are happy and the employees are validating the brand and contributing to the brand, then they're less likely to leave. And again, in a startup, you can't afford to have people leave the company. Again, make sure your brand is transparent and you've got the employees to back that up at every step of the way. A few best practices. I know this sounds obvious and it might be a perfect world, but make every single hire count. Make them count in terms of just getting them on board, but leverage them in terms of the recruiting. So every person who joins a startup is effectively an evangelist for that company. They've got to then help hire other candidates, whether that's referrals, whether that's just interviews, like make them part of the recruiting process, get them on board with what the company's trying to achieve, and tell them the story that without us recruiting, we're not going to grow as a company and we're not going to be successful. And really instill that recruiting is super important. Again, some of the startups I've worked with in the past haven't done that. I've maybe joined the company thinking, yeah, my job's in marketing or my job's in development. Recruiting, nah, that's someone else's problem. The reality is recruiting is everyone's problem. You can't be successful in a startup without people. And the only way you get people is to recruit. And I think every person who joins a startup needs to be aware of that from day one. You've got to make them feel like they're part of the evangelism and part of the recruiting process. Recruiting shouldn't be seen in a startup as a pain or a hassle or something that no one really likes to do. It should be part of their job, and they should be even measured on how well they can help bring great people into the company. Again, sounds obvious, review applications carefully. I often looked for the basic skill sets of the people I wanted, but how a person writes a resume often tells a lot about the person behind the resume, like how they go about describing themselves, whether they've got any hobbies, the words they use. Try and understand the person that's written the resume. I was personally always bored with every resume looking the same. I was always looking for individuals who could write resumes in new ways and innovative ways and make it more exciting for me to read or straightforward or easy for me to understand whether they're potentially someone who I'd want to hire. So I kind of dig deep into the applications. Past experience isn't everything. This is so true. I think of the 5 startups I've worked at, 3 of them have failed. And that's, I look at those failures and I probably learned more in those failures than I've ever learned through any other experiences as a job. The fact people have failed before shouldn't put you off because they can learn from their failures and they know what doesn't work. Fortunately, the last company I went into, AppDynamics, I applied everything I'd learned in the previous 2 startups that had failed, and I managed to get things right, and I was a lot more successful in that role. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't failed previously. So people's past experiences, kind of use it as a kind of reference, but don't assume that because they worked at an unsuccessful company that they wouldn't be a great fit for your company. Judge them on what they know and their experiences, and how motivated they are about helping you become a great company. Another simple thing, write killer job postings. Don't write the job postings you think you should write. Write the job postings that you want your candidates to find compelling and exciting. Don't feel like you have to use formal languages or kind of formal content. Be exciting, be compelling. Use the words that are relevant. Make people feel as they're reading the job description, yeah, this is the company I want to work for, or I can tell the person who's written this job description is someone I'd like to work for. Try and stand out. Don't just write a boring job description. We've got some great people at Glassdoor who validate a lot of the job descriptions that are posted on Glassdoor.com, and they often see employers who just put the bare minimal job spec for their company. We've even seen people cut and paste job descriptions from other companies with the other companies' names on that have gone live on Glassdoor as a job advertisement. And that's just, I mean, take the time, write compelling job descriptions, because if they're not compelling, there's not a lot of chance candidates are going to be interested and want to apply. And again, like, reflect the company's personality in everything you do, whether it's the brand, whether it's the job description, and be real. Don't feel like you have to say the right things to give the impression that you want to say everything the candidates want to hear. Be real and be authentic, and really make people believe in the company and what you stand for as part of every interaction you have with the job candidates. And that'll basically allow you to differentiate yourself. If you've got exciting job descriptions and your competition don't, I mean, it's pretty obvious which candidates are going to apply for your positions versus your competitors. And again, in startup environments where you're trying to be different, and you're trying to get engineering talent, or you're trying to hire people in sales or marketing, you've got to be different. If you're not different, no one's gonna care. Referrals, again, this is part of the employee engagement. I think almost between 30 and 40% of hires now in companies is referrals. So again, the first thing you do when someone comes on board is tap their network, understand where they have relationships. Again, the companies I've worked at, no one's done a really great job of doing this. If you're hiring people from the competition, you've got a lot of people who've got great networks and great relationships. On day one or on the first week, you should be reaching out to that person and going, okay, who else do you know? Who else can we potentially look to recruit? And if you hire the right people with the right culture and the right fit, chances are their friends and their connections and their networks are going to be able to allow you to tap more of that talent. Referral program goes without saying. I think we've seen referral rates as much as $3,000 or $4,000, or even upwards of $10,000, depending on the type of position that's available. But incentivize employees. And the biggest reason why this is important is I look back at when I was recruiting, and when I felt like I wasn't making much progress, I would go to an agency. And I would go to a headhunter or a recruiter whose fees were between 15 and 25%. And the one thing you have in a startup is not a lot of money. And the worst thing you want to do is spend 25% commission trying to bring in employees into the company. And this is why referrals are just so critical in a startup environment. You've got to grow, and you've got to do it in a cost-effective manner. You can't afford to keep paying 20% commissions for every engineer or for every person you bring into the company, because you'll end up just bankrupting the company. And again, like, this is some pictures of what it's like to work at Glassdoor. We've got kayaks, we've got fancy dress parties, and we've even got our own beer, as you can see there. But again, try and point out, like, this is our company. Like, if you have to think of 3 or 4 photos that best represents your company, like, amplify those photos wherever you put your brand, whether it's your career page, whether it's your Facebook profile, whether it's your Glassdoor profile. Make sure people understand quickly what it's like to work at your company. And again, like I said, make it personal. Don't have automated responses on candidate applications. Just treat people like people. People want to feel important, and people want to feel special. And at every part of the recruiting process, make them feel like they're welcome, and and they want to be part of the company. Again, speaking from my own experience, when people reach out to me, make it about me. Don't treat me like every other individual you speak to on a day-to-day basis. If I get the sense that you've sent me an email that you've sent to 100 or 1,000 other people, I'm probably the first thing I'm going to do is delete it. Make everything personal and approachable. So just to summarize, applicant quality is super important. Define what that means for your company and your culture. Go about creating an employer brand. You need to do this because no one is aware that your company exists. And be transparent. Make sure the brand reflects what it's like to work in the company through your employers and your culture. You can do that by engaging with employees, making part of them of the conversation, get them involved with validating the brand and contributing to it. And then finally, measure your progress. Understand what's working. Many companies go through a rebrand. I'd be interested to know how many companies can tell what the difference that the rebrand actually made to the awareness and the buzz and what impact it had on the business. So with that, I'll hand it back to Cher and see if there's any questions.
All right, thanks for the questions, everybody. Since we're kind of running out of time here, I'm just going to pick a couple to ask Steve. The first one is, what do you think is the best way to show candidates that a startup cares about their company?
The best way to show candidates that a startup cares about their company is to respond to feedback and reviews. So if I'm a job candidate and I've seen employees post reviews or I see people have got something to say about my company, you need to get people in the company at the exec level to be part of that conversation. We've seen that recently with a few companies where the CEO of the startup has actually responded to reviews and responded to feedback about the company. What that says to job candidates is that the exec team cares about people's opinions and cares about what employees are thinking in the startup environment.
All right, and lastly, do you think it's best when you're talking about surveys, do you think it's best to have the employer do surveys of their employees or have a third party do it when talking about the culture?
I think the key thing here is whether the survey is authentic and whether it's going to be treated as a survey. Don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. I think if you want honest opinions, you've got to ask honest questions. You can obviously tailor the survey to make it kind of extract positive feedback, but you need a balanced view of what it's like to work for at the company. And that's really what candidates want as well, is they want the balanced view. They don't just want to hear all the glitz and the glamour about what's successful in a startup. They also want to hear what can be improved. So whether the employer does the survey or a third party, I think it's the survey content and the questions you ask so you get a balanced opinion of employees versus just asking them, hey, what's great, and hoping that they'll not say anything bad about the company. No company is perfect, and I think candidates understand that. They just want to see, I think, employees be real and transparent and look at the cons or look at the things that need addressing and make actions for that.
All right, and if we didn't get to a couple questions, we can definitely reach out to respond individually, but I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. We hope you got a lot out of this webinar. Just to clarify, we will be sending out the recording of this session, so feel free to rewatch it or send it on to your colleagues. Thanks again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at another upcoming Glassdoor webinar. Have a great rest of your day.